After 2 years, I still remember the rest of that day, the night, and the next day as a constant flow of police, photographers, and reporters going in and out of Gatsby's front door. A rope blocked the main gate, and a policeman kept the curious away. But some boys found a way in through my yard and stood amazed near the pool. That afternoon, a man, possibly a detective, called Wilson a madman as he looked at Wilson's body. His confident voice set the tone for the newspapers the next morning. Most reports were like a bad dream, strange, detailed, eager, and false. When Michaelis spoke at the inquest about Wilson's doubts about his wife, I thought the story would soon become gossip. But Catherine, who could have said anything, said nothing. She showed strong character, looked firmly at the coroner, and said her sister never met Gatsby, was happy with her husband, and never did anything wrong. She believed this herself and cried as if the idea was too hard to accept. Wilson was called a man broken by grief, so the case stayed simple. But all that seemed far away and unimportant. I felt alone on Gatsby's side. After I called West Egg Village with the news, everyone asked me questions or guessed things about Gatsby. At first I was confused. Then, as Gatsby lay still for hours without moving or speaking, I felt responsible because no one else cared with the deep interest that everyone has the right to have at the end. I called Daisy about half an hour after we found him, without thinking twice. But she and Tom had already left early that afternoon and took their bags with them. Left no address? No. Say when they'd be back? No. Any idea where they are? How I could reach them? I don't know. Can't say. I wanted to get somebody for him. I wanted to go into the room where he lay and reassure him, I'll get somebody for you, Gatsby. Don't worry. Just trust me and I'll get somebody for you. Myra Wolfsheim's name wasn't in the phone book. The butler gave me his office address on Broadway, and I called information. But by the time I had the number, it was long after 5 and no one answered the phone. I'm afraid no one's there. I returned to the drawing room, and for a moment thought all the official people who suddenly appeared were just visitors by chance. But when they pulled back the sheet and looked at Gatsby without any emotion, I heard his voice in my head saying, Look here, old sport, you've got to find someone for me. You must try hard. I can't face this alone. Someone began asking me questions, but I left and hurried upstairs to check his desk where the drawers were unlocked. He never clearly said his parents were dead, but I found nothing there except a picture of Dan Cody, a symbol of a violent past hanging on the wall. The next morning I sent the butler to New York with a letter to Wolfsheim asking for information and urging him to come by train. I thought this was unnecessary because I was sure Wolfsheim would react when he saw the newspapers and that Daisy would send a message before noon. But no message came and Wolfsheim did not arrive, only more police, photographers, and reporters. When the butler brought Wolfsheim's reply, I felt a strange kind of loyalty between Gatsby and me against everyone else. Wolfsheim's letter said how shocked he was and that he couldn't come because of important business, but asked to be informed later by letter. That afternoon the phone rang from Chicago and I hoped it was Daisy. Paul instead. A man named Slagle spoke and told me about trouble with someone called Young Parkey related to stolen bonds. I told him Gatsby was dead, and then the call ended suddenly. On the third day, a telegram arrived from Henry C.C. Gatsby's father, saying he was coming and to delay the funeral. He was an old, serious man, clearly upset and tired, wearing a heavy coat despite the warm day. His eyes were wet with emotion, and when I took his things, he nervously pulled at his gray beard. He was so weak I helped him to sit in the music room and brought him some food. But he couldn't eat and spilled the milk from his shaking hand. I saw it in the Chicago newspaper, he said. It was all in the Chicago newspaper. Moved ceaselessly about the room. It was a madman, he said. He must have been mad. Wouldn't you like some coffee? I urged him. I don't want anything. I'm all right now, Mr. Carraway. Well, I'm all right now. Where have they got Jimmy? I took him into the drawing room where his son lay and left him there. Some little boys had come up on the steps and were looking into the hall. When I told them who had arrived, they went reluctantly away. After a short time, Mr. Reasoned, Gats came out of the room with his mouth slightly open, his face a little red, and tears falling from his eyes at random times. He was old enough to accept that death was not a shocking surprise anymore. When he looked around for the first time and saw the tall, beautiful hall and the large rooms leading to others, his sadness mixed with a proud feeling. I helped him go upstairs to a bedroom, and while he took off his coat and vest, I told him that all plans were waiting for him to arrive before moving forward. I didn't know what you'd want, Mr. Gatsby. Gats is my name. Mr. Gats. I thought you might want to take the body west. He shook his head. Jimmy always liked it better down east. He rose up to his position in the east. Were you a friend of my boy's, Mr. Censor? And I nodded. If he'd have lived, he'd have been a great man. A man like James J. Hill. He fumbled at the embroidered coverlet, trying to take it from the bed, and lay down stiffly, was instantly asleep. That night, an obviously frightened person called up and demanded to know who I was before he would give his name. This is Mr. Carraway, I said. This is Klipspringer. I was relieved, too, for that seemed to promise another friend at Gatsby's grave. I didn't want it to be in the papers and draw a sightseeing crowd, so I'd been calling up a few people myself. They were hard to find. The funeral's tomorrow, I said. 3 o'clock, here at the house. Of course you'll be there yourself. Well, I'll certainly try. What I called up about is— Wait a minute, I interrupted. The fact is, the truth of the matter is that I'm staying with some people up here in Greenwich, and they rather expect me to be with them tomorrow. In fact, there's a sort of picnic or something. For, he went on nervously, what I called up about was a pair of shoes I left there. I wonder if it'd be too much trouble to have the butler send them on. You see, they're tennis shoes, and I'm sort of helpless without them. My address is care of B. Pry. I didn't hear the rest of the name because I hung up the receiver. After Gatsby died, I felt some shame because one man I called suggested Gatsby got what he deserved. That was my fault, because the man often mocked Gatsby, especially when Gatsby was drinking. I tried to find Maya Wolfsheim in New York for the funeral, but it was hard. At a company called the Swastika Holding Company, a woman told me Wolfsheim was in Chicago, but I knew he was inside because I heard someone whistling. Then Wolfsheim called for a woman named Stella, and she told me to leave my name. Wolfsheim finally appeared and invited me to his office, offering me a cigar. He told me about meeting Gatsby when Gatsby was a poor young soldier with many medals, wearing his uniform because he had no other clothes. Wolfsheim said he helped Gatsby start his business and was very close to him. When I asked if he would come to the funeral, Wolfsheim said no, because he did not want to get involved. He said he avoids trouble now, but when he was young he would support friends until the end. I understood he would not come. Gatsby's father, excitedly showing me a photo of Gatsby's house. He was proud of his son and the photo, which he had looked at many times. He told me Gatsby had visited him 2 years ago and bought his house. Although they had been apart, Mr. Gats now understood Gatsby's reasons and said Gatsby was generous after becoming successful. Then he showed me an old book he kept. Look here, this is a book he had when he was a boy. It just shows you. He opened it at the back cover and turned it around for me to see. On the last flyleaf was printed the word schedule and the date September 12, 1906, and underneath, rise from bed. 6:30 a.m. Dumbbell exercise and wall scaling. 6.6.30. Study electricity, etc. 8:4:30 p.m. Baseball and sports. 7.009.0. General resolves no wasting time at shafters or our name, said the old man. You, said the old man. He always had some resolves, like this or something. Do you notice what he's got about improving his mind? He was always great for that. He told me I ate like a hog once, and I beat him for it. Mr. Forret. Gats was careful not to close the book. He read each item out loud and looked at me as if hoping I would write the list down. Before 3 o'clock, the Lutheran minister arrived from Flushing. Both Mr. Gats and I looked out the windows, hoping for more cars to come, but nobody else arrived. The servants waited quietly. Gats grew anxious and worried about the rain. The minister checked his watch several times, and I asked him to wait half an hour. But it was no use. No one came. Around 5 o'clock, 3 cars arrived at the cemetery in the rain. First came a black hearse, then Mr. Gats, the minister, and me in a limousine, and finally the servants and a postman in Gatsby's station wagon, all soaked. As we entered the cemetery, I heard a car stop and someone running behind us through the wet ground. It was the man with owl-eyed glasses, the same man I had seen admiring Gatsby's books months ago. I didn't know how he found out about the funeral or knew Gatsby's name. He wiped his wet glasses and looked at the canvas covering Gatsby's grave. I tried to think about Gatsby, but he seemed far away. I remembered that Daisy hadn't sent any message or flowers. Someone whispered, "Blessed are the dead that the rain falls on," and the owl-eyed man said, "Amen," bravely. We left quickly in the rain. Owl Eyes told me he couldn't get into Gatsby's house. I said no one could. He was shocked that so many people used to visit the house, then called Gatsby the poor son of a bitch. One strong memory I have is returning west for Christmas from school or college. At the old Union Station in Chicago, friends said quick goodbyes amid winter cold, snowy streets and Christmas lights. I felt deeply connected to this part of America, the Middle West. Even though I was from the East, the West was always part of me, full of memories of cold winters, holiday sounds, and family traditions. After Gatsby died, the East felt strange and twisted to me. When the wind blew wet laundry on the line and leaves smoked blue in the air, I decided to go back home. Before I left, there was one difficult and uncomfortable thing I had to do. I wanted to make sure everything was clear and not just leave it to chance. I found Jordan Baker and talked to her about what had happened between us and what had happened to me. Afterward, she sat quietly in a big chair, listening. Jordan was dressed for golf. I remember thinking she looked like a good picture, her chin raised confidently, her hair the color of an autumn leaf, and her face the same brown color as the glove on her knee. When I finished talking, she told me without emotion that she was engaged to another man. I didn't believe her, but I pretended to be surprised. For a moment I wondered if I was making a mistake, but I quickly thought again and got up to say goodbye. Suddenly, Jordan said, "You did leave me. You left me on the phone. I don't care about you now, but it was a new experience for me." "Oh, do you remember a time we talked about driving a car?" she asked. "Not really," I said. "You said a bad driver was only safe until she met another bad driver." "Well, I met another bad driver, didn't I? I was wrong about you. I thought you were honest and straightforward. I thought that was your secret pride." "I'm 30, I said. "I'm too old to lie to myself and call it honor." She didn't answer. Angry and sorry, I turned away. One afternoon in late October, I saw Tom Buchanan walking ahead of me on Fifth Avenue. He looked alert and aggressive, moving his head sharply, his hands ready to fight off anyone. He stopped in front of a jewelry store and looked inside. When he saw me, he came back and held out his hand. "What's wrong, Nick? You know what I think of you. You're crazy, Nick. Crazy as hell." "I don't know what's wrong with you." "Tom," I asked, "what did you say to Wilson that afternoon?" He looked at me silently, and I knew I was right about what happened in those missing hours. I started to walk away, but he grabbed my arm. "I told him the truth," he said. "Wilson came to the door while we were getting ready to leave. When I said we weren't home, Wilson tried to come upstairs. He was crazy enough to kill me if I hadn't told him who owned the car. He had a gun in his pocket all the time he was in the house." He stopped and said proudly, "What if I did tell him? Wilson deserved it. He lied to you just like he lied to Daisy, but he was tough. It wasn't true. If you think I didn't suffer too, look. When I went to give up the apartment and saw that box of dog biscuits on the table, I sat down and cried like a baby. It was terrible. I couldn't forgive or like him, but I understood that he believed what he did was right. It was all careless and confused. Tom and Daisy were careless people. They broke things and hurt people, then went back to their money or carelessness and let others clean their mess." I shook his hand. It felt silly not to, because suddenly he seemed like a child. Then he went into the jewelry store to buy a pearl necklace or maybe cufflinks, and I stopped feeling uncomfortable. When I left, Gatsby's house was still empty. The grass on his lawn had grown as long as mine. One taxi driver in the village always stopped by the gate and pointed inside. Maybe he was the one who drove Daisy and Gatsby to East Egg the night of the accident. Maybe he had his own story about it. But it's so... I didn't want to hear it, so I avoided him when I got off the train. I spent my Saturday nights in New York because Gatsby's bright, exciting parties stayed with me clearly. I could still hear the soft music and laughter from his garden and the cars driving up and down his driveway. One night, I heard a real car and saw its lights stop at his front door. But I didn't check. Maybe it was one last guest who had been far away and didn't know the party was over. On my last night there, with my suitcase packed and my car sold, I went to look at Gatsby's big, confusing house one more time. On the white steps, someone had written a rude word with a piece of brick. The word was clear in the moonlight. I erased it by scraping my shoe on the stone. Then I walked down to the beach and lay on the sand. Most big houses near the shore were closed, and there were hardly any lights except for a ferry boat's soft glow moving across the water. As the moon rose higher, the unimportant houses seemed to disappear, and I became aware of the old island that once caught the eyes of Dutch sailors, a fresh, green part of the new world. The trees that used to be there, the trees that Gatsby's house had replaced, once whispered to the greatest human dreams. For a short, magical moment, people must have stopped breathing in front of this land, feeling a wonder they didn't fully understand or expect, meeting something as powerful as their own ability to be amazed. While I sat thinking about this old, unknown world, I thought about Gatsby's wonder when he first saw the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had traveled far to reach this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that it felt possible to reach. But he didn't know the dream was already behind him, somewhere in the dark, unknown beyond the city, where the wide fields of the country stretched on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the exciting future that moves further away every year. We missed it then, but it doesn't matter. Tomorrow we will try harder and reach further. And one beautiful morning, so we keep going, like boats rowing against the current, always pushed back into the past.